There's this idea floating around that if you're not talking about what you're doing, you're not really doing it. That success requires an audience, that progress needs to be documented, that every step forward should be posted, shared, announced. We live in a world where people broadcast their morning routines, their workouts, their productivity hacks, their goals for the quarter. And there's nothing wrong with that, necessarily. But somewhere along the way, we started confusing the announcement with the achievement. Started thinking that saying you're going to do something is almost as good as actually doing it. It's not. And the people who understand that difference, who can shut up and work while everyone else is performing productivity, those are the ones who end up winning in ways that matter. Not winning the attention game, not winning the follower count, but actually building something real. Creating something that lasts. Becoming someone who doesn't just talk about success, but embodies it. Working in silence doesn't mean being secretive or antisocial. It's not about hiding what you're doing out of fear or insecurity. It's about understanding that the work itself is more important than the performance of working. That real progress happens in the hours when nobody's watching, when there's no one to impress, when it's just you and whatever you're trying to build. Those hours are where everything meaningful gets made. Everything else is just noise. Think about the last time you saw someone constantly posting about their new project. The business they're launching, the book they're writing, the transformation they're going through. Updates every few days, screenshots of their progress, motivational captions about grinding and hustling. How often does that actually lead to something finished? How often do those projects disappear quietly, replaced by the next announced venture, the next public commitment? It happens all the time, because announcing your intentions feels good. It gives you a little hit of dopamine, a sense of accomplishment without the actual accomplishment. Your brain treats the announcement like progress, even though nothing's changed. There's research on this. When you tell people about your goals, your brain gets a premature sense of completeness. It's called social reality. You've made the goal real in a social context, got validation for it, and now your brain is less motivated to actually do the work. It already got the reward. This is why people who talk constantly about what they're going to do often don't end up doing it. They've satisfied the need for recognition before putting in the effort. Working in silence avoids that trap. When you keep your goals to yourself, when you don't announce every step, you stay hungry. You don't get the cheap satisfaction of other people's encouragement or admiration. You only get satisfaction from actual results, from concrete progress, from the work itself. And that keeps you honest. You can't pretend you're further along than you are. You can't coast on potential or good intentions. You either do the work or you don't, and there's no audience to perform for in between. This doesn't mean you never share anything. It means you share after, not during. You share results, not process. You share when there's actually something to show, not when you're still figuring it out. And the interesting thing is, when you do finally share, it hits different. It's not another update in an endless stream of updates. It's a reveal. It's proof. People respect that more because it's real. You're not asking them to believe in your potential or trust that you'll follow through. You're showing them you already did. There's a certain power in that. In being underestimated, in working below the radar, in letting people think you're not up to much while you're actually building something significant. It removes pressure, removes expectation, removes the need to justify yourself before you've actually achieved anything worth justifying. You get to work at your own pace, make mistakes privately, iterate without everyone watching. And then when you're ready, when the thing is actually done, you emerge with something undeniable. Look at some of the most successful people in any field, the ones with staying power who build things that last. A lot of them are quiet about their process. They don't post every day about their routine or their struggles. They just work. And then one day they release something, achieve something, become something, and everyone's surprised. Where did that come from? How did that happen? It happened in the silence, in the hours no one saw, in the discipline of showing up consistently without needing anyone to validate it. There's also something to be said for protecting your ideas, your energy, your focus. When you're constantly talking about what you're working on, you open yourself up to opinions. And opinions, even well-meaning ones, can derail you. Someone questions your approach. Someone suggests a different direction. Someone expresses doubt, or worse, enthusiasm that feels obligating. Suddenly, you're not just managing your work, you're managing other people's perceptions and reactions. That's exhausting, and it's a distraction from the actual work. Silence gives you freedom. Freedom to experiment, to fail, to change direction without having to explain yourself. You don't owe anyone updates. You don't have to defend your choices or justify your timeline. You're accountable to the work, not to an audience. And that accountability is purer, more honest. You can't bullshit yourself when you're working in silence. There's no one to impress but yourself, and you know whether you're actually putting in the work or just going by the way. We're wired for social connection, for validation, for feedback. We want people to know what we're doing, want them to care, want them to cheer us on. That's natural. The problem is when that need becomes more important than the work itself. When you start making decisions based on how they'll look rather than whether they'll work. When you start optimizing for content instead of results. That's when you lose the plot. Working in silence requires discipline. It requires resisting the urge to share every small win, every insight, every moment of progress. It requires being okay with the fact that people might not know what you're up to, might not think about you at all. That's uncomfortable. We like being visible, being relevant, being part of the conversation. But visibility isn't the same as productivity. Relevance isn't the same as achievement. And being part of the conversation doesn't mean you're actually building anything. The people who win loudly, who emerge with undeniable success, are usually the ones who were willing to be invisible for a while, who put their head down and worked when they could have been networking, posting, building a personal brand. They bet on the work being enough. And when the work is good enough, when it's real enough, it speaks louder than any amount of self-promotion could. There's a difference between confidence and noise. Confident people don't need to announce everything because they trust that the results will speak. They're not worried about being forgotten or overlooked because they know what they're building is worth noticing once it's done. Noise is what insecure people make. It's the constant need for reassurance, for attention, for proof that they matter. And the irony is that the more noise you make, the less people tend to respect you, because everyone can see through it. Everyone knows the difference between someone doing something and someone talking about doing something. Working in silence also protects you from comparison. When you're not constantly consuming other people's updates, their wins, their progress, you stay focused on your own path. You're not measuring yourself against someone else's highlight reel. You're not getting discouraged because someone else seems further ahead. You're just doing your work at your pace, in your way, and that's liberating. Comparison is one of the fastest ways to kill motivation. It makes you feel behind even when you're exactly where you should be. It makes you question your approach even when it's working. Silence shields you from that, but here's the thing. Working in silence isn't about being a hermit or cutting yourself off from the world. It's about being selective with your energy. It's about understanding that every conversation about what you're doing is energy that could have gone into actually doing it. It's about protecting your most valuable resource, which is your focus, your time, your capacity to do deep work without distraction. You can still have mentors, collaborators, people you trust to give feedback, but those relationships are different from broadcasting to the internet. They're private, intentional, useful. You're not seeking validation, you're seeking insight. And you're only sharing with people who have earned the right to be part of your process. Everyone else can wait for the results. There's also something deeply satisfying about this approach. When you're not performing, when you're not managing anyone's expectations but your own, the work becomes purer. It's just you and the thing you're making, no buffer, no audience. You get to know yourself better in that space. You figure out what you're actually capable of when no one's watching. You discover your real limits, your real strengths. And you build a kind of integrity that doesn't come from public accountability. It comes from private commitment. And when you finally do win, when the thing you've been working on succeeds, it feels different. It feels earned in a way that announced victories don't. Because you didn't hype it up, didn't promise anything, didn't ask anyone to believe in you before you'd proven it to yourself. You just did it, and now it exists. And people can take it or leave it, but either way, you know you did the work. That knowledge is worth more than any amount of likes or congratulations. Winning loudly doesn't mean you have to announce it yourself, by the way. The best kind of winning is the kind other people notice and talk about because they can't ignore it. Your work speaks for itself. Your results become obvious. People start asking what you've been up to, how you did it, why they didn't see this coming. And you get to smile and know that while they were talking, you were working. While they were posting, you were building. While they were performing productivity, you were actually being productive. This isn't about being arrogant or secretive for its own sake. It's about understanding what actually matters. And what matters is the work, the hours you put in, the problems you solve, the things you create, the person you become in the process. None of that requires an audience. None of that needs to be documented in real time. It just needs to happen. The world is full of people with potential. People with ideas, with plans, with good intentions. What the world needs is people who actually execute, who take those ideas and turn them into something real. And execution doesn't happen in public. It happens in private, in the quiet hours, in the moments when it would be easier to check your phone or post an update or take a break. It happens when you choose the work over the performance of working. There's a quote that gets attributed to various people. Probably none of them actually said it, but it goes something like this. Work hard in silence, let success make the noise. It's cliché, sure. Gets printed on t-shirts and shared by hustle culture accounts. But strip away the cliché and there's truth there. Success that comes from real work, from consistent effort without constant validation, that success is louder than anything you could announce. It's undeniable. It doesn't need hype because it is what it is, and everyone can see it. Think about the people you actually respect. Not the ones you follow for entertainment, but the ones you genuinely admire. Chances are they're not the loudest people in your feed. They're probably relatively quiet. They post occasionally, share when it's relevant, but mostly they're just living their lives and doing their work. And yet their achievements speak volumes. That's the model worth following. Working in silence requires trust. Trust that your work is good enough to eventually be noticed. Trust that you don't need constant feedback to stay on track. Trust that the delayed gratification is worth it. And that trust has to come from within. You can't outsource it to an audience. You can't rely on external validation to keep you going. You have to believe in what you're doing enough to keep doing it even when no one's paying attention. That's hard, especially in the beginning, when you're not sure if you're on the right path, when progress is slow, when doubt creeps in. It's tempting to reach out, to share, to get reassurance that you're not wasting your time. But every time you resist that temptation, you get stronger. You build that internal trust. You prove to yourself that you can keep going without external validation. And that's when you become dangerous. Because now you're not dependent on anyone else's opinion. You're not waiting for permission or approval. You're just doing the work because the work matters to you. And here's what happens when you commit to that. You get better faster. Because you're not wasting time on optics or updates or managing perceptions. All that energy goes into improvement, into learning, into iteration. You make mistakes faster because you're not afraid of looking bad. You take risks because no one's watching. You experiment because you don't have to justify every decision. And all of that compounds. You get so far ahead of where you'd be if you were working publicly that when you finally do share, people can't believe how much you've accomplished. This approach isn't for everyone. Some people genuinely benefit from public accountability, from community support, from sharing their journey. And that's fine. But if you find that the sharing is becoming more important than the doing, if you're spending more time documenting than creating, if you're more concerned with how things look than whether they work, it might be time to go silent for a while, to disappear into your work and see what happens when you stop performing and start producing. The beautiful thing is, you can always share later. The work isn't going anywhere. Once it's done, once it's real, you can show it to the world. But you can't go back and do focused work if you spent all your time broadcasting. You can't reclaim the energy you spent managing an audience. So the question is, what do you want more? The feeling of being seen while you work, or the satisfaction of having actually built something worth seeing? Most people choose the former without realizing it. They default to sharing because it's become the norm. But the people who choose the latter, who choose silence and substance over visibility and performance, those are the ones who end up with something real. Something that lasts beyond a few likes or comments. Something that changes their life, their career, their trajectory. Working in silence isn't glamorous. There are no montages, no inspirational soundtracks, no audience cheering you on. It's just you and the work, day after day, without fanfare or recognition. But that's where transformation happens. That's where you become the person